Now, This Week with Bob Mueller on News 2.
This week,
the FBI was invited into the president's home. I'm not going to go beyond that.
More classified documents discovered in President Joe Biden's private home.
Let me ask you, as we sit here in your home office in Indiana, did you take any classified documents with you from the White House?
I did not.
Well, apparently he did, as classified documents are discovered in the home of former Vice President Mike Pence.
They wanted to say that cyber attacks had caused this.
Senator Marsha Blackburn and others take Ticketmaster to task over the Taylor Swift ticket debacle.
It all goes back again. I can't emphasize enough. This is failed leadership at the highest level.
Tennessee House Democratic Caucus Chair John Ray Clemens says Governor Lee and GOP lawmakers are failing Tennesseans.
I'm bringing this to be able to help our school security officers to be able to help manage behavioral problems.
And GOP lawmakers file legislation that would allow school security guards to put special education students in handcuffs. More in our This Week cover story. Hello again and welcome to another edition of This Week, a push to allow security guards in schools to handcuff students receiving special education as a way to control behavior. More in our This Week cover story. Democratic House Caucus Chair John Ray Clemens on Governor Lee's handling of HIV funds, execution protocols, and more. First, more classified documents found in President Biden's home and now former Vice President Mike Pence's home.
President Biden facing new questions today over the discovery of additional classified documents found in his private Delaware home this weekend. The president's attorney revealing the FBI searched the president's Wilmington, Delaware residence for almost 13 hours, discovering 6 items consisting of classified records dating back to his time as a U.S. senator as well as vice president. Biden's team saying they offered federal agents remarkable access to search the home of a sitting president's old files, handwritten notes, and to-do lists. Biden and the First Lady were not home during the FBI search.
The FBI was invited into the president's home. I'm not going to go beyond that.
But critics question why the multiple prior searches Biden's legal team conducted hadn't uncovered these new classified documents. House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer on Fox News.
This should put to bed whether or not President Biden's attorneys either know actually the extent of his irresponsibility or they're not being truthful with the DOJ.
Some top Democrats frustrated and disappointed.
It diminishes the stature of any person who is in possession of it, because it's not supposed to happen. The elected official bears ultimate responsibility.
Despite the new discovery, the White House still saying they take the handling of classified materials very seriously and are fully cooperating with the Justice Department.
As it relates to the American people and the president standing with the American people, it is going to be up to them to decide how they see this president.
As the investigation continues, a spokesman for the White House counsel's office not ruling out the possibility of Biden's Delaware beach house being searched as well. Em Nguyen, ABC News, Washington.
Classified documents were reportedly found at the Indiana home of former Vice President Mike Pence, and the Department of Justice now reviewing the matter. According to letters obtained by ABC News to the National Archives, a representative for the former VP says that on January 16th, Pence asked lawyers to review records that were stored in his home. That's when lawyers found a small number of documents that could potentially contain sensitive or classified information. The letter states Vice President Pence immediately secured the documents in a locked safe, adding that Pence was unaware of the records being in his possession. A second letter to the National Archives dated just 2 days ago explains that Pence turned the documents over to the FBI on January 19th. Sources say the search was done proactively in the wake of classified documents being found at President Joe Biden's Wilmington home and old office. Just 2 weeks ago, Pence was on Fox News, slamming the Department of Justice, saying they should treat Biden's investigation the same as Trump's. And in November, months before all of this came to light, he told our David Muir plainly he did not take any classified documents from the White House.
Let me ask you, as we sit here in your home office in Indiana, did you take any classified documents with you from the White House?
I did not.
The DOJ is already using special counsels to investigate documents found in Biden and former President Trump's possession. Officials are trying to determine whether Trump or anyone else should face criminal charges. And the DOJ is not commenting, but the Republican House Committee on Oversight and Accountability chair releasing a statement saying Pence reached out to him, saying he agreed to fully cooperate with any congressional oversight and questions on the matter. I'm Morgan Norwood, ABC News, New York.
The state health department says it won't accept federal funding for HIV prevention. Instead, they'll use state dollars. But Democratic lawmakers say this could have bigger implications outside of Tennessee. Here's Chris O'Brien.
The state of Tennessee declined federal funding for HIV prevention.
I've had a relative pass away from HIV. It was years ago before, modern medicine and treatment. And fortunately now, because the government has invested in prevention and treatment, the government has saved countless lives.
Nashville Democrat Representative John Ray Clemens says he was leery about sharing his personal connection because he didn't want to politicize it. But he felt compelled because of the decision not to accept what Democrats call free money.
It's unconscionable. For those of us who have witnessed a loved one suffering from this horrible virus and ultimately dying from this virus, it just shocks the conscience.
The state health department says it's planning on instead using state money for HIV prevention. Writing in a release, this administration is examining areas where it can decrease its reliance on federal funding and assume increased independence.
And it's important that it's spent effectively and efficiently in the ways that best serve Tennessee. And so we think that we can do that better than the strings attached with the federal dollars that came our way, and that's why we made that decision.
Particularly noteworthy is that the federal funding gives money to Planned Parenthood, an organization Republican leaders have long tried to cut ties with because of its history of providing abortion care. Instead, Lee says the state's dollars will go toward other nonprofits involved in fighting HIV.
Those funds will then be directed at whatever organizations are serving those populations the best.
Democrats say the move is more political than it is intelligent.
What we want to encourage our Tennessee Department of Health is to reconsider this decision. This is free money from the federal government that is being passed through the department. It's not like the state is putting any money into this fund in the first place.
Now, the federal funding would come from the CDC. According to the center, it has given over $10 million and over 110,000 HIV tests across Tennessee. Now that burden would be on the state. In Nashville, Chris O'Brien.
GOP lawmakers filed legislation allowing school security guards to handcuff students receiving special education if needed to control behavior. Currently, only school resource officers are allowed to do that. Here's News 2's Chris O'Brien.
House Bill 127 says a school resource officer, school security officer, or other law enforcement officer may use a mechanical restraint on a student receiving special education services in an emergency situation.
I'm bringing this to be able to help our school security officers to be able to help manage behavioral problems.
Hamilton County Republican Representative Greg Martin says the Hamilton County School Board attorney asked him to file this bill. Currently, only school resource officers can put a child receiving special education in handcuffs. This bill expands that to include school security officers.
They work a Monday through Friday job. They're not a sworn deputy. Many of them are retired sheriff's deputy, police officers, etc. And they are not allowed to restrain a child that is having behavioral problems.
When asked about potential blowback, Martin seems surprised.
Well, I think it's about protecting people from harming themselves and harming others. And I certainly, everyone in the legislature would be for protecting children from harming themselves and harming other children.
Though Martin will run into some sort of opposition.
And that's something we need to be very cautious in moving forward on. Being special needs, there are things that are out of their control. I think we need to tread very carefully.
Nashville Democrat Representative John Ray Clemens says this bill shouldn't be a priority.
We need to make sure we're more focused on protecting these children and educating them than restraining them.
But Martin argues this bill accomplishes the goal of protection.
Cain slew Abel. Cain slew Abel. Children can be violent.
Under this bill, it's important to note that any officer the state authorizes to use handcuffs has to undergo a behavioral intervention training program. And the number of school security officers actually has grown over the past few years. Take Knox County, for example. WATE reported back in August that this school year has more school security officers in that school district than ever before. In Nashville, Chris O'Brien.
Stay with us. This Week continues in a moment. Welcome back to This Week. I'm pleased to be joined by Nashville Democratic Representative and the new chair of the House Democratic Caucus, John Ray Clemens. Complete honesty, we play hockey together every now and then. Welcome. Nice to see you.
Thank you for having me, Bob.
This is your first legislative session as House Caucus Chair.
Right.
You know what you face up there, supermajorities in both houses from the Republicans. How do you do in your position? What do you have to do to move forward, not only an agenda, but the Democratic voice to make it louder?
Well, first of all, it starts with holding our colleagues accountable, because a lot of the things that go on in the state capitol don't make it out into a lot of Tennessee households. So we have to do a better job of communicating about what is actually happening in our state capitol and holding our colleagues accountable, because, you know, so often they can vote a certain way on 2 or 3 issues and they think that's going to do well. But meanwhile, they're passing bill after bill that has a direct harmful impact on Tennessee families.
As House Caucus Chair, is your role part of dealing with trying to recruit younger folks? I mean, you know the only way to increase the Democratic voice is to have more elected officials. Is that part of what you're doing as well, recruiting, having a bench, as it were?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm traveling the state of Tennessee, speaking to people, hearing what the concerns are out there across Tennessee, and working with potential candidates. I mean, my ultimate job is to break the supermajority in the House of Representatives. And so if I'm a success, we will pick up seats and we will continue to, you know, better define ourselves rather than allow the Republican Party to define us.
A few issues that the legislature will likely be dealing with this legislative session: a scathing audit of the Department of Children's Services. It revealed children sleeping on floors. Children had died in DCS care. The commissioner called it a system about ready to collapse in need of funding. Democrats called for a special session. The governor did not do that. He did promise more money and is now saying he will have something to say in the State of the State address. But really, since this scathing audit has come out, nothing has been done to improve the situation. Is this a failure of the system?
Well, it's a failure of leadership. I mean, this is an executive department that has absolutely failed children in state custody. When you have children sleeping on the floors of state office buildings and children going missing, that, you know, out of the schools or out of the foster care system entirely, that is a complete failure of leadership, and Governor Bill Lee is to be held accountable for that, and he should be. And, you know, this isn't something that just came about. We didn't just learn about this with this audit. We've known about this for some time. Representative Gloria Johnson and Senator Heidi Campbell, they have been pounding this issue for years, and no one has done anything about it. And now all of a sudden, you know, Governor Bill Lee talks about it's going to be a priority of his. But at the end of the day, these are children. These are the most vulnerable children in the state of Tennessee. And to think that we allowed this knowingly to take place in this department to absolutely fail these children is unconscionable.
Executions in this state, the governor put on hold almost a year ago now. An investigation that he asked for revealed a complete failure of following protocols. It also revealed, shockingly, that those in charge of carrying out the execution were told by some that these drugs may not work and that these inmates might feel pain, and the executions went forward anyway. Is this a bigger issue than what's been addressed? Does there need to be the legislature asked for hearings to find out how this could have happened?
Well, let's just start with the fact that we need to sit back and evaluate whether the death penalty is actually effective at deterring crime in the state of Tennessee and nationwide, and then talk about what, you know, if we are going to continue the death penalty in the state of Tennessee, it has to be carried out in accordance with the U.S. Constitution and the laws of the state of Tennessee. And right now, again, another example of failed leadership. You know, you take your eye off the ball and don't do your job, and this is the type of result you get. And we're seeing this across every state department.
Governor just this week or last week announced that the state would not be taking federal funds for HIV protocols, that he would rather use the state funding because this way the state can control where the money goes. Is this a waste of taxpayer money when you got federal dollars out there doing the same thing?
This issue is personal to me. For any of us who have had to witness a loved one suffer from this terrible virus and ultimately die from it, to think that our governor is unilaterally deciding to cut off funding from the federal government that could provide prevention and treatment services, it's again, this is unconscionable. This evidences a concerning lack of care about your fellow Tennesseans, because these organizations are providing vast resources and doing tremendous work to save lives. You know, for those of us who lost a loved one, possibly, you know, we're going to lose more as a direct result of this.
As you're well aware, last year Tennessee approved one of the strictest abortion laws in the country. It's almost a total abortion ban. There are now calls to amend this law, doctors, women's groups, to provide for exceptions for rape, incest, and for the life of the mother. There are no exceptions in this law. New Vanderbilt poll shows 70% of Tennesseans would approve an abortion ban of 15 weeks with exceptions, and that same poll shows that Tennesseans oppose a total abortion ban, especially one that has no exceptions. The governor, the lieutenant governor have opposed this. The Right to Life groups oppose this. They don't want to change the law. The Speaker of the House has changed his position a little bit. He's willing to consider amending it. Does this law need to be amended? Does it have any chance of being amended?
Well, first of all, it's the single most restrictive law in the entire country. And so we have to better represent Tennesseans, because you're absolutely right. An overwhelming majority of Tennesseans believe there should be exceptions. They believe that there should be instances where reproductive health care services are warranted. And so this is yet another example of the supermajority not representing the majority of Tennessee families. And so we have a lot of concern about this. We as Democrats welcome anyone across the aisle who's willing to work with us on this, to try to protect the lives of families, their well-being, and also our medical community. Our medical community under the current law is presumed guilty until proven innocent. That affects their livelihood. We have doctors who are transferring out of the state of Tennessee at this moment, and residents not wanting to come to Tennessee because of this law. Look at the long-term ramifications of that type of situation. We must fix this, and it is one of our top priorities, and again, we will work across the aisle and welcome any invitation to do so.
As you look at this legislative session, the first of 2 years for this session, what do you see as the top priority for Tennesseans that needs to be addressed as you move forward?
Well, we have seen nothing but ongoing attacks on our public education system and the undermining of public school teachers. We must save our public school systems in the state of Tennessee. We must build a modern transportation infrastructure system statewide, specifically our urban areas as well, because they're generating the vast amount of revenues that benefits the entire state. And if we want to plateau our prosperity in Tennessee, let's stop investing in infrastructure. We need to better educate our children, invest in public education, and invest money in infrastructure.
National Democratic Representative from the state of Tennessee, John Ray Clemens, House Caucus Chair. Appreciate your time and your insights, sir.
Thank you.
Stay with us. This Week continues in a moment. Welcome back. Ticketmaster and its parent company, Live Nation, were grilled on the nation's capital. Tennessee Senator Marsha Blackburn and others demanded answers from the ticket industry after the Taylor Swift ticket sale debacle left millions of her fans fuming. Here's ABC's M. Wynn.
Ticketmaster and parent company Live Nation in the hot seat at a Senate Judiciary Committee hearing after their Taylor Swift concert tour ticket meltdown left millions of her fans furious.
The way your company handled the ticket sales for Ms. Swift was a debacle. And whoever in your company was in charge of that ought to be fired.
The lockouts, delays, and soaring aftermarket prices raising concerns on both sides of the aisle over Ticketmaster's alleged monopoly on the market.
You can't have too much consolidation, something that unfortunately for this country, as a ode to Taylor Swift, I will say we know all too well.
Senators questioning Live Nation and Ticketmaster's 2010 merger that has given them outsized influence over much of the live event industry, accusing it of crushing competition from smaller companies, which some critics claim harms consumers.
A lack of robust competition in our industry meaningfully stunts innovation. Venues fear losing Live Nation concerts if they don't use Ticketmaster.
Joe Burchell, the president of Live Nation, blaming the Swift sale debacle on an attack from bots sent by ticket scalpers.
This is what led to a terrible consumer experience. which we deeply regret.
These ticket platforms need to, when they know they've got a bot in their presence, they need to give that information to the FTC so that the FTC can go after this, so they can be blocked from these sites, and so that fans, whether they're fans of the Grand Ole Opry or Taylor Swift or any of the other ones that are out there, they can get the tickets for the shows that they want.
Connecticut's Senator Richard Blumenthal pushing to have the Live Nation Ticketmaster merger undone.
Ticketmaster ought to look in the mirror and say, I'm the problem. It's me.
The Justice Department is investigating Live Nation for possible antitrust violations, looking into whether the company abused its power over the live music industry. Live Nation has said it takes antitrust laws seriously and did not act improperly to achieve its market power. Em Nguyen, ABC News, Washington.
Stay with us. This Week continues in a moment. Thanks for spending part of your weekend with us. That will do it for another edition of This Week. I do want to thank my guest, House Democratic Caucus Chair John Ray Clemens. Hope to see you back here next weekend for another edition of This Week. Between now and then, you have a great week.